Hello, everyone, and welcome to another half pint session. Now, normally I have a pint of beer or a half pint of beer, but since it's the new season and we now have these lovely stoneware mugs made, I thought I'd have a nice big cup of tea. Also, I still have a little bit of work that I got to do today, so going to lay off the alcohol for a little bit. But I am very, very pleased to have with me John Hendrix, the author of this wonderful book, Mythmakers. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And in honor of the Inklings 11 a.m. pint, I'm ready to go. So I assume I'm going to be super productive the rest of the day, and I'll just go with that.
When I'm outclassed by my guests, it does make me really happy. Now, I think just from that introduction, I think everybody has got some idea of what they're dealing with. But would you mind just introducing yourself to people who don't know who you are?
Thank you. I am John Hendrix. I am an author illustrator. I primarily work in comics and sort of this blended prose, nonfiction visual storytelling. I'm also an educator. I have started a graduate program for illustration in St. Louis, Missouri, called the MFA Illustration and Visual Culture Program. So I've taught at WashU in St. Louis for 20 years. So between teaching about illustration, reading, and making my own comics, I just feel like I'm thinking about pictures and visual storytelling all the time.
And I do have to say, I have really enjoyed this book. I particularly like at the beginning, you have a note to the readers, and you explain all the asterisks where you cite all of your sources. I want this to become a thing. I want graphic novels to include way more footnotes, and you've got the sections at the end about a glossary for British vocabulary. I'm just going to print that out and just send it to my relatives just so they stand a chance at understanding what I'm saying.
It was kind of necessary in this book just because I was doing a lot of filling in the gaps of things we don't have records for, but there was a lot that we do. And so I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that I wasn't, that this was not fan fiction, most of it. And so, yeah, that system was very important for me, to readers to know from the beginning.
And there are Easter eggs everywhere. If people pore over the pictures and pay attention, the more you know about Lewis and Tolkien, the more you'll get out of this book. But
it's true. Most kids who read this book don't pay off any of the fun visual Easter egg jokes in this. You have to have read like a couple Lewis and Tolkien biographies to really get the maximum amount of fun out of this book. So yeah, I'm glad you appreciate that.
Well, your chief avatars, so to speak, in this book are a lion and a wizard, which is a very, very novel choice for Lewis and Tolkien.
Totally, I just picked two random characters to narrate this book.
But we've been talking about this book for too long without actually explaining what it is. How would you describe Mythmakers? What is it about, and what sort of things do you cover in it?
Well, it's a graphic novel, or at least it's graphic nonfiction, but at Barnes & Noble, it's going to go in the graphic novel section. And it's a story that is on the surface level about the unique and remarkable friendship between Tolkien and Lewis. But really, it's a story about where do myths come from and why do stories bring us so much joy? Because that's really what Lewis and Tolkien were trying to figure out. And their own friendship helped them complete their sort of artistic journey in their life and help them answer that question. So really, I wanted the readers to join them in their examination of myth, story, and kind of human purpose. So that's really what the book is about. And as you said, I use a talking lion and a wizard to get us there, basically.
So what was your own background with the Inklings before this, and how did all that culminate in writing a book about them?
Well, in some ways, this book is a kind of love letter to them, or a gratitude note. They just really shaped my early life so profoundly that I just loved not only the worlds that they made, but their own world themselves. And if kind of we're honest with ourselves, the Inklings are as much of a myth in a way as Narnia and Middle Earth, actually. Like, we all sort of long for that bookish, intimate life in the dark pub, reading poetry and story among our friends. I mean, that occupies this kind of hallowed idea that many of us really don't achieve very often. So in some ways, I wanted to illustrate that, like that myth had never been illustrated. And so setting them inside of a world where they're almost surrounded by their own mythological framework was kind of a cool concept, and something that I just immediately thought, I gotta do this.
Yeah. How have the Inklings been a source of inspiration and nourishment for you, sort of as a person and also as an artist?
Yeah, well, I mean, I read, the very first thing I read was Narnia, but I read it out of order. So it just I think I was HarperCollins did their terrible work on me because they numbered them incorrectly, and so I think I read Magician's Nephew first. I'm not positive, but I came to that as just a great portal fantasy. Somebody gave me The Hobbit when I was probably 10, this beautiful illustrated version, and I just carried it around with me. It was important to me, but all the dragon drawings, the everything about it was like a world I wanted to live in, and I didn't really know why. And then the older I got, and my own Christian faith became important to me, and then I found out that these two folks were also writing from this framework. I read Screw Tape Letters that blew my mind, that you could write a book that was both hilarious, convicting, and like a little irreverent. And then I had not believed, this is insane to say, but I had not connected Screw Tape Letters to Narnia like when I read it. And then it was like, oh, okay. And so then the idea of world building, fantasy as a genre that enlivened the imagination and sort of put the imagination in a place where it was revered and cherished as a kind of piece of theological wonder. That is really the thing I owe to them, and the thing I wanted to try to let people into.
And the subject matter that you're covering in this story, both their own biographical details and their understandings of myth and story and meaning, in many ways, it really is kind of the second tier into the Inklings. Once people have read some of their popular works, and then they start digging into their biographies, and they start reading some of their essays, like on fairy stories and on 3 ways of writing for children, and you start seeing this much richer tapestry that you never even knew was there. And it's wonderful that I think you provided a single shot into that, a single volume where you get to explore that idea, because they are very heady ideas, and quite frankly, this giving somebody this book is I would say far simpler than giving them several biographies and essays and commentaries to try and consume.
Totally. And this was my frustration with, well, with really all of scholarship, is that the only way to get a full picture of a historical figure is to read an 800-page volume, and then maybe another one that offers a counter, right? Like all of that, especially young people, like you said, On Fairy Stories is just this criminally underread essay that Tolkien wrote that really lays out his argument for why fantasy world building is the highest form of human art. And there's just like so many kids that, like, if they like the Avengers, the reason they like Avengers is talked about in this essay. And no 12-year-old's going to read On Fairy Stories by Tolkien, right? But if I can sink those ideas into this passage in this book where Lion and Wizard get to ride a dragon and talk about subcreation and why that's an activity that is so enlivening and the arguments for it and against it. Again, if you can trick them into reading this, I think it will, ultimately help them. And then maybe they go and read the essay themselves. Like this is a book, I think, that ultimately points people back to, Tolkien's letters is another one. Like I always tell people, if you really want to understand the Silmarillion, read his letters, because that's where he actually explains what it's about more so than the actual stories in some way. But yes, like I would love it if this book pointed people back to the original works themselves.
And you say kids are never going to read On Fairy Stories, but I'm going to try and slip it into my son's homeschooling curriculum when he's old enough. At the moment, he's only 5, and he and I actually have been reading.
It's never too early. It's
Well,
never
exactly.
too early for On Fairy Stories.
Yeah, he and I actually have been going through your book together. It's been a little bit disjointed, and he's been asking lots of questions that I've struggled to sometimes find answers to. But
I had an 8-year-old come up to me and said they read it in a night, and I honestly didn't believe them. But they were, when I pressed them, this is sort of the like, I love you too. Name 5 songs. Like I pressed him a little bit, and he he obviously had ingested the comics portions, right? And so that's pretty cool that a kid that young could like get through that book, read the pictures, read the imagery. Yeah, I told him, I said, I think you should skip the portals, the illustrated footnotes in the back. Come back to those in a couple years, and maybe this book can provide some rereading enjoyment.
Well, I grew up reading Asterix and Tintin,
Oh,
and
love Asterix.
both of those series I loved and enjoyed, principally the pictures, and then coming back to it as an older adult, uh, I was stunned at all of the jokes that just went way over my head, and lots of subtle nods to things that were going on in Gaul and Rome at the time of the stories, with Asterix in particular.
A
So
funny story about Asterix. I had in junior high, they gave us like a little survey of foreign language classes you could take, and the French class sample was they were reading Asterix, and I had never heard of it before. That I took French essentially so that I could read these French comics. I shortly realized that I hated everything about language learning, but I loved reading comics, and so yeah. So Asterix always has a very warm place in my heart.
Well, when I had a French exchange student at school and I went to France, he was a big Asterix fan as well. So, for a good portion of my French exchange, he and I lay on the floor reading Les Adventures d'Astérix.
Oh,
And I was just going through and just translating it. So, I think I've still got the notebook where I was translating, might have been Asterix and. Oh, it's the one where they go to Rome. That's it. I think
yeah.
it's the one. Oh no, it was where they go to Paris. That was it. So one where they go to Paris. I think I got about three-quarters of the way through. My French translation exercise was Asterix. So big fan of that. But what did you do in terms of research for this? Because again, if you know more than the average bear with regards to C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, you'll see quite how much stuff is packed into here. Even if everything isn't explicitly unpacked, you can definitely see that there's a fabric of a very clear understanding of everything that went on with the Inklings. So, what were you reading to in order to be able to write a book like this?
Yeah, well, comics take a long time, even if you don't research them, right? So this was a 5 year project, and the first couple years was the writing and the reading. And yeah, I did read a lot. I mean, one, I enjoyed it. I think almost all my projects are an excuse to do research and reading on things that I want to read. And so, yeah, I'm actually glad that it feels that way, because the thing I feared the most was not the 12-year-old reading it, but the Tolkien scholar who's like, this guy did not read, so I just had this like this this hovering shadow of the great Inkling scholars criticizing my work. So in some ways, it was very motivating. But probably my favorite book was the Zalesky book, The Inklings.
Mm-hmm.
That one is a great read. I tell people read that one. I love, in terms of Lewis, I love The Narnian. That was by Alan Jacobs.
Alan
That was my
Jacobs.
favorite of his. The Michael Ward book, the Planet Narnia. Oh my gosh, amazing! Like, so there's a lot to take in that's just fun to read, and most of those are cited in the back. So if people want more resources, but yeah, and I always tell people the letters. The letters are great. That's one thing I can't imagine. Are people going to be citing texts and emails in the future? Because like the idea that Tolkien and Lewis did so much of their formation and fellowship in pen on paper is so cool, and it's the fact that we have a record of it is awesome.
Whenever I get near anyone that has contact with people like HarperCollins, I always ask them to pass on the pitch that they need to bring out more editions of the letters, but like thinner slices. So in the
Yeah,
same way that you have Lewis's letters to Arthur Greaves, you've
that's
got his
right.
Latin letters, you've got letters to an American lady. It's like, give us more like that, because both of them wrote voluminously in terms of letters. But
Totally.
when I see them collected together, I am kind of intimidated. So I would like to see more books like that.
You could pull out, I mean, you could pull out just the letters on the Silmarillion, and that would be an amazing addition. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, letters to Numenor. There you go. I think that'd be great. Okay, so that's the technical side of the research. Now, I know you interviewed with Phil from the Lamppost Listener, and you your pen nerds got into great detail about paper and dimensions and other stuff like that. But for us more normal humans, what was the process of actually putting all of this together? And as I mentioned just before we recorded, I'm a computer nerd. So if you want to talk about some of the computery sides of things, that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, no, it's actually a good question because a lot of people may imagine that, AI has a lot to do with making comics or, how do these things made? And they all start with pencil on paper for me. I draft everything in a little sketch form, a little thumbnail, and then I make the finished art on paper with a pen as well. I can work digitally, but I just love the feeling of pen on paper and it's just more enjoyable to me. And also, there's an economic reason because then you can sell original drawings afterwards. So almost all comic artists at a certain level make their work as originals because the original art carries such aftermarket value. But that being said, the digital tools are awesome, and the whole thing was colored in Photoshop using a Wacom tablet. I could have done it in Procreate or something like that, which are all great platforms. But I love Photoshop. I love my Wacom. I have some custom brushes that I've made that sort of replicate what my normal paints and pens feel like. So yeah, it's a big tool set, and eventually, it's a digital file that goes to a printer overseas. So it's an insanely complicated process. Also, making a book that has so much set type, like digitally set type, and then hand drawn elements. And like for instance, if my editor says like, "Hey, this paragraph doesn't work here. Let's move it somewhere else." Where like the whole book is like chock a block. I mean, it's just like a Tetris game. So every change in the editorial really influences the art. So I actually have a really unique relationship with my publisher, Abrams. They allow me to control the InDesign file. So I actually do all the typesetting myself, which I was trained as a designer. So I have some of that skill set anyway. But it's honestly, it would be insane to try to do this as responsive as they want it to be without somebody kind of holding the whole reins. So yeah, I'm pretty fortunate in that case.
Now, one of the unique features of this book is the portal system. So would you mind just telling us what that is and how that came about?
Well, you probably grew up with choose your own adventure books, which I was
Oh yeah,
obsessed with. And there's been many.
I really like the ninja ones. There was like
Yeah,
Ninja
oh,
Assassin,
absolutely.
Ninja Usurper.
Oh yeah, there was a Time Machine series I loved. I mean, the first ones I read were the Dungeon and Dragons Choose Your Own Adventure books, which are incredible. But these were all the portals were. If you haven't read the book, it's like illustrated footnotes that are in the back. But inside the story, you can go through a portal to read something more about something Lion and Wizard are talking about, or you can just skip it and keep going with the story. And this actually came from my editor was really frustrated. Initially, I had all of those research elements inside the body of the story. And he was like, "This is insane. It's too long. I don't know what we're doing, like learning about the history of the fantasists." And I was like, "No, this is essential." And he's like, "You got to figure out a way to help the reader through this." So that's when I came up with this door system, because doors were already really important to the story as a visual metaphor anyway, as they are in the work of Tolkien and Lewis. So it really added up to a kind of fun system that allows the reader to jump around through the book.
Mm-hmm. And on the cover, it looks awfully reminiscent of the Wood Between the Worlds. So you began with a portal system to begin
That's
with.
right. There's the wood. There's the wood between the worlds. There's the Moria Gate. There's the wardrobe itself. There's a lot of There's a lot of things to play on in there.
Now, in July, Collider.com announced that there's going to be an animated feature film of this book. What can you tell us, and how much are you going to be involved?
Well, I am in name an executive producer, so you're talking to somebody that should have a lot of information. But but actually, no, I am very excited about this. An incredible studio picked it up. They're a smaller studio, but they really get the book, and they have an amazing team that's working on it. I've had a creative writing session with the screenwriter and the director. We're gonna have to. It's a 90-minute animated film, so you can't get the whole book in there. And also, they're gonna have to do some sort of Hollywood tricks to get it to kind of translate to 90 minutes. So we've added kind of a villain character. The Lion and Wizard are on much more of a very explicit quest than in the book, and so the goals of the book is the same. They're longing to sort of replicate some of the color palette and the look of the actual art, which is really awesome. But it's just starting production now, so it may be a few years. But yeah, it's exciting to see it come to life in that way.
I'm very excited for that, and a villain as well. It's like, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, is this going to be an eye? Is it going to be a lady with very pale complexion? We'll see. We'll see.
I know there's really so much. You could probably write this screenplay just as well. So yeah, send me your ideas.
Okay, and yeah, anyone put them down in the comments below afterwards. What about any future works? And also, what other works have you done just to position Mythmakers among the other things that you've produced?
Yeah, so the last few years, I've been basically making graphic novels that work to take something complicated and sort of explain it to young minds, and often centered around a biographical approach. So my previous graphic novel was about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German theologian and pastor who joined an assassination plot against Hitler. And then before that, I've made drawing books. Drawing is magic. I have a collection of comics about the Holy Ghost and what he does during his time off, which I'm sure you've always wondered. And this book will answer that. He hangs out with a squirrel and a badger, and they talk about theology. And that book is basically Calvin and Hobbes fan art. So if you like Calvin and Hobbes, that's what I'm trying there. Yeah, but so all of that to say, I've done picture books, I've done a lot of graphic novels for young people, and my next long form graphic novel, as kind of part of this, it's a kind of trilogy in a way that's examining different kinds of fellowship. Uh, Bonhoeffer was part of this rebellious fellowship. Tolkien and Lewis were in this generative one, and so my third book in this group is about the Salem witch trials and how their fellowship was actually a destructive one, right? So I really am interested in demonology and how the power of fear and certainty can distort community. And so I'm still in the reading phase. I've started doing some, demon drawings, of course, but yeah, I'm hoping that'll be out by 2028.
Well, if you want to branch off from there, you could have another go at doing the illustrations for the Screwtape Letters. I actually just bought the Marvel comic version of the Screwtape Letters.
Oh, I haven't seen that. I should try. I should check that out.
I'll see if I can get it. Hang on a moment. Here we go.
Oh my gosh! Wow, is it public domain or did they get the license for it?
I assume they got the license for it.
Okay, yeah.
And so you can pick these up on eBay now.
Okay.
And mine inexplicably came with basketball cards.
Uh-huh.
Not sure why, but they were included.
I was hoping it was going to be C.S. Lewis like dunking over LeBron or something.
that would be good. Yeah, when I was reading through your book, this often happens whenever I speak to artists. I always have suggestions from stuff I would like to see. I would love you to do something related to Dorothy Sayers, because she's written beautifully about the creative process in her book, The Mind of the Maker. Plus, she was a whodunit author, among other things. And so, you could have a murder mystery through the story as well. Endless possibilities.
Okay, so I love Mind of the Maker. Dorothy Sayers is sort of in Mythmakers, sort of. There's a character called Dr. Thistle that is sort of her, but her sort of Trinitarian view of art in my next book that's a sequel to Drawing is Magic, called the 100 Things List. I make a chart of that thing that she talks about. So yes, I would, but I have always wanted to do something with Dorothy Sayers.
And I think illustration would definitely help with her stuff, because Mind of the Maker, some chapters are straightforward, other ones are my brain is broken. I don't
totally.
I can't quite put all of this together. I can't get my arms around it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So
yeah, no, I think a lot of writers like that. But again, she should have been in the Inklings, really. If the Inklings had met today, she would have been a vested member. With Ruth Pitter, probably lots of people in the Inklings. Besides, if it wasn't all male in that era of friendship.
and also the necessity of being local, because she was a little way away. But
That's right.
if the Inklings had existed today, it would be post COVID, so everybody would have a Zoom account
A
anyway.
Zoom,
So
a Zoom. Oh, nothing is more depressing. How could
yeah,
Hugo Dyson flop onto a couch and refuse to listen to Lord of the Rings if it was on Zoom?
I'm just seeing like the Zoom chat. It's like Hugo Dyson has been blocked by J.R.R.
Yes,
Tolkien.
he has left the chat.
I love it. Well, before we let you go, I have to ask you about your wonderful background, because you have all kinds of things here. And how did you manage to convince your family to let you buy all of
I,
these wonderful
okay,
things?
so I mentioned earlier, I've been limited, no more replica swords. But every Halloween, I love making a costume. So I was the Witch King of Angmar last year, so that was an exciting build. I've been the Tower of Barad-dûr, which was just a helmet with the Eye of Sauron on top. And so I don't know. I was Kendolph a couple years ago, which was a Ken from Barbie Gandalf mashup. So yeah, this is my studio, and so I get a bit of a free pass up here. But yeah,
So you can claim for creativity and artistic direction.
that's right.
It's like, this is
Yes,
for my work.
I know. I have to do this. I'm required to be surrounded by interesting objects.
Maybe I'll try that the next time I want to buy a first edition collection of the Chronicles of Narnia. See what my wife says.
I
That might
bought
not
when I
work.
was in the UK over the summer. I bought a first edition Four Loves from Lewis, which those are actually not so expensive.
Mhm.
And it was that was I have a third edition Last Battle, which pushed the realm of what was possible to convince anyone was worth spending. So yeah, that's where I've topped out.
Have you ever seen C.S. Lewis doodle on YouTube, where the Lewis work is being read and somebody is drawing at the same
Oh
time?
yeah. I have seen those. Yeah, somebody sent me those.
Yeah. Again,
That's
just another suggestion. Because I've been
good.
reaching out to the person who's behind that, managed to track them down, but they're refusing to respond to me, which is a bit sad. But I would very much like to buy like a poster version of some of those, or a
Oh
booked
yeah,
version. So I'm just saying, art is great, but I also think there's a real market for that sort of thing.
agreed. Yeah. I love those whiteboard demos.
And speaking of markets, you mentioned before that some of your work is available for purchase. Where would people go in addition to picking up a copy of your book?
Yeah, the books are really everywhere, depending on where you are. You can always go to abramsbooks.com to see where you can get your copy. But you can go to johnhendrix.com. I've got a store with prints. If you have a book that you want me to sign, I have some what are called book plates, little stickers I'll sign and send to you. And also, if you're interested in originals, just send me an email.
Wonderful. John Hendrix, thanks so much for coming on the show.
All right. Cheers.
And everyone else, please join us again next time when we'll continue going further up and further in. Cheers.